This is a conversation that begins in silence, a quiet moment, far from the world's noise. It is a story told by your own body, the story of a collapse, a profound withdrawal that feels like failure. But it is, in truth, a necessary act. We often mislabel this state as simple laziness, as a lack of motivation, or as just physical fatigue. But what if this desire to stop is the deepest wisdom of your soul? Along the journey, we will name the hidden forces, the heavy mask you wear, the parts of yourself you have exiled, the ancient wound of never being enough. This is a story about deep psychological exhaustion, but also about the courage of integration, the sovereignty of silence, and the path back to genuine self-truth. Listen closely. Allow the world to wait. Because perhaps, just perhaps, this is the moment your soul finally stops fighting the need to rest. So, have you ever woken up feeling the world was moving forward without you, as if you were drifting in a quiet ache you couldn't name? It's more than tiredness or sadness. It's a whisper in your chest, a sense that something essential is missing, like a part of you got lost along the way. You watch others chase goals, post smiles, yet inside, you're wandering a wilderness, searching for a place that feels like home. If this resonates, this video is for you. And this feeling has a physical weight, doesn't it? An immense desire to remain where you are, to stay lying down all day, suddenly gains supernatural control over your will, almost without warning. It doesn't shout or beg for attention, it simply commands withdrawal. And suddenly, everything changes. The energy shifts, the pressure of expectations fades, and all that remains is a heavy, thick fog over the mind. This isn't laziness, and it's not simple lack of sleep. It is a profound weariness, a weight settled in your bones and your gaze, residing deep within your soul. When this heavy apathy sets in, the external world, which constantly demands speed, productivity, and performance, comes into immediate conflict with your inner self, which clamors for pause, silence, and suspension. And this is where the judgment begins, both yours and others. They whisper that it's lack of willpower, that you must simply react. But something deep within you knows that reaction is impossible, because there is no energy, no impulse, even when time is freely available. You feel acutely that something is profoundly wrong, yet you cannot name it. You feel the thread of your own volition has been cut, that an essential inner light has been extinguished. Carl Jung said that the soul sickens when it is in disharmony with its destiny, and that the body, loyal to this suffering soul, begins to manifest symptoms. Now think about this. When the body refuses to lift, when the energy withdraws completely, who truly gets desperate? Is it the body, or is it the parts of your life, the tasks, the duties, the relationships that depend entirely on you suppressing your own truth? This profound exhaustion reveals more about the life you are trying to sustain than it does about your inherent strength. You keep giving yourself, striving to sustain roles and expectations that are no longer authentic, sacrificing your vital energy just to maintain a facade. With every forced step, every performance, every attempt to correspond to external demands, you drain your inner strength. And at the end of the day, what remains? Only the tiredness, the sense of being confused or broken, and the immense silent need to remain hidden. This video is not an injection of shallow motivation to force you back into action. It is an invitation to look with reverence at this state of collapse, to understand that behind the desire to stay lying down all day, there are subtle, sacred voices trying to communicate something essential. It is not a fault, it is a sacred resistance. This is about learning what Jung called individuation, the necessary journey toward becoming whole and authentic. And this process often begins when you finally listen to the symptom of withdrawal as a map, not an enigma. So I ask you now, looking into your deepest self, how long will you continue to be ruled by the obligations of a life that does not resonate with your core? How long will you react like a puppet to the external pokes of productivity culture? Maybe it is time to cut those strings, to withdraw into the self, and to understand the profound reasons for this vital shutdown. Because when you stop pushing yourself, the soul begins to speak, revealing at least 7 deep, symbolic and existential causes that may be behind your impulse to stop. You have been taught to always be resilient, to respond quickly to demands, to perform the role society expected of you, even when your soul whispered no. Since childhood, you have been conditioned to believe that your intrinsic worth is tied to how functional and adapted you are to the world's mechanisms. But here is a truth that perhaps no one has told you with this clarity. This relentless push to adapt is not a virtue. It is a profound prison. And as long as you continue to think you must be functional all the time, you will be constantly manipulated by external expectations, drained of your true desire, and exhausted. Do you know why this happens? Because being always on and functional makes you predictable, a tool for others' validation or needs. People use you as an emotional or structural anchor, demanding your presence until they are relieved, then putting you back on the shelf. But you are trapped in the illusion that continuous presence will somehow secure your belonging. It doesn't work that way. The first and most common reason for your deep fatigue, according to Jungian thought, is Motif 1: the exhaustion of the persona. The persona, as Jung described it, is the social mask we learn to wear to deal with the world, a necessary adaptation. The exhaustion begins not when you wear the mask, but when you identify so completely with it that you forget who lies behind it. To be accepted, you extinguish vital nuances, hide uncomfortable emotions, and repress authentic impulses. Sustaining this character requires immense control and continuous performative presence, and this relentless effort drains your vital energy. It is precisely why the desire to lie down does not originate in a lazy body, but in an exhausted soul, weary of performing and corresponding to external demands. The unconscious, acting like a wise rebel, sabotages this rigidity by cutting the engine, pushing you toward the bed, declaring you must rest from this lie. The cruelty lies in the fact that often you believe this persona is you, convincing yourself that everyone lives this exhausted, but your body knows the truth. It registers the misalignment when the show you put on outside contradicts the reality within. The withdrawal to the bed, in this context, is more than simple repose, it is a protest, a refusal, a sacred return to self-silence. Motif 2: the unintegrated shadow. Asking for listening. Jung warned that every excess of adaptation generates shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or exile, because we believe they are unacceptable to the world. These exiles, your denied anger, your buried shame, your fear, your genuine strength, do not disappear, they accumulate and tense up, consuming immense energy just to be kept out of conscious awareness. This continuous vigilance, controlling reactions, monitoring thoughts, maintaining appearances, drains your vitality and desire. The desire to stop and hide from the world can be a side effect of this process. Your psyche, unable to sustain the theater any longer, pulls you inward, into the dark, not to punish, but to force you to encounter these parts you have denied. The exhaustion becomes a letter from the unconscious, an urgent plea to stop denying who you fundamentally are. Lying down becomes the only physical space where your shadow is still allowed to exist without demanding control. Motif 3. The wound of the father and the guilt of resting. This motif speaks not just of the biological father, but of the archetype of authority, expectation, and worth. When this figure, through action or omission, plants the idea that you are never quite good enough, an internal critique takes root. This voice, which should inspire and guide, transforms into an unrelenting inner judge that whispers, "You have no right to stop. You only deserve rest if you have conquered and proven your value." When you finally stop, the pervasive guilt you feel is not rational, it is ancestral. It is the weight of being taught to measure your worth by what you produce, not by who you are. The deep pain comes from the invisible internal war between the sensitive part of you screaming for pause, and the part molded by the father wound that deems rest and vulnerability inadmissible. This internal war consumes your vital energy more than any external task. The bed becomes the space where the father cannot impose his demands, but even there, the inherited guilt seeks to follow. Motif 4. The lack of existential meaning as symptom. Beyond goals or career plans, there is an intimate sense of purpose that makes it worthwhile to open your eyes each morning. When this profound connection disappears, everything you do feels disconnected from your soul, and the will evaporates. The simple act of rising becomes an almost impossible effort. You may have a full agenda and many responsibilities, but nothing resonates. Everything has lost its color and taste. This loss of meaning is subtle. It arrives not with noise, but with an absence of desire and curiosity. The withdrawal here is a protective response, a return to a symbolic, dark womb where perhaps something new can emerge. The collapse is not the end, Jung taught, but a profound signal that the life you were sustaining must die so that a truer one can be born. Lying down becomes gestation, a pause of rupture. This deep pain is hard to name. Outsiders see structure and success, but they cannot see the silence and absence of inner light that consumes you. Your soul is demanding presence, saying firmly, "I will not continue without meaning." If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Carl Jung did not see the human psyche as an automatic machine that simply reacts to stimuli without consequences. For him, your mind is an energy system, and every thought, emotion, and action consumes a part of that vital force. The question becomes, are you consciously directing where this energy goes, or are you allowing the world and your unacknowledged psychological conflicts to decide for you? People who live perpetually drained are not weak, they are profoundly misdirected, spending their inner strength on what does not nourish them. The chronic exhaustion that forces you to withdraw to the bed is often a direct result of two more energy-sapping processes: the crushing weight of over-adaptation and the failure to honor your soul's natural rhythms. Motif 5. The overload of adaptation. Since childhood, you learned that being accepted was often more important than being authentic. This subtle, constant lesson became an automatic pattern, observing the environment and molding yourself to it, even at the cost of your inner well-being and truth. Adapting continuously is not a singular effort. It is a relentless, continuous strain, a constant need for double-checking every gesture, every response, every choice. You must often agree when you disagree, smile when you are sad, and stay when every cell in your body wants to flee. Every small betrayal to the self accumulates an internal burden, pressing down on your chest and shoulders until a breaking point is reached. When this inner scream of, "I can't take it anymore," is ignored, the body intervenes forcefully. It slows down, it locks up, it pulls you toward the bed. The true name for this collapse is emotional exhaustion. The willingness to lie down is an unconscious act of rebellion against the invisible prison of forced conformity. The cruel irony is that the world often celebrates this adaptiveness, calling you strong or resilient, while remaining blind to the price, the tension, the emptiness, and the erosion of your true self. You become a reflection of what others want, an adaptation constantly moving. The collapse forces you to stop performing and seek that inner space, the bed, where you can simply exist without the need to please. The refusal of the body to continue sustaining mere adaptation is the necessary start of integration, the Jungian path of returning to being an individual rather than merely a social function. Motif 6. The archetype of withdrawal. The soul's winter. This cause speaks to a rhythm we have forgotten, the sacred cyclical pauses found in nature. Just as winter arrives to silence the earth, forcing animals to hide and trees to shed their leaves, the soul also experiences periods of retreat. This pause is not an absence of life, but a deep preparation. However, we have been conditioned to see withdrawal as a failure or a regression, ignoring the body's plea for profound rest and silencing the soul's cry for quiet. The desire to lie down often appears because you have unknowingly entered a cycle of archetypal withdrawal, a necessary psychological winter that demands reflection and interiorization. It is not a time for doing, but a time for being, allowing the old patterns to die so the new can find space to emerge. Any attempt to force movement during this period becomes a violence against the self. The bed transforms into a symbolic cocoon, a deep internal chamber where the soul reorganizes itself. The body understands this wisdom before the mind does, forcing the pause because it knows this time is not empty, but fertile gestation. The unconscious communicates through this symbol of retreat, inviting you into a necessary interior journey. To resist this cycle is to attempt to flourish in winter, which is cruel and futile. Now, before we move to the final cause, it's essential to understand that when you honor these needs and stop resisting the self, you break the projections that others place upon you. And this unsettles many, for we are about to enter the dark territory of silent psychological manipulation. You might believe your responses are conscious choices, but the darker truth is that many of your emotional reactions are programmed by the need to manage the external world. Carl Jung named this the mechanism of projection. Others place onto you what they cannot bear to see in themselves. And the more available and exhausted you are, the more you become a blank canvas for these images. Think of the person who only reaches out in crisis, or the one who praises you only as long as you are playing the useful role. They are not relating to you, they are relating to the idea of you. And you continue to agree to this role out of the most effective form of manipulation, the silence of guilt. You believe you owe them your presence, your help, your continuous understanding, even when it is internally destructive. But when you finally reach the point of collapse, when your body forces you to stop reacting, the game breaks. Your withdrawal begins to crumble the projections placed upon you, and the mask they imposed falls away. This leaves others unsettled because they are now forced to look at their own internal emptiness, revealed by your absence. Your emotional unavailability, the sheer inability to keep going, is a threat, because it forces them to confront the wounds they have always used you to escape. This leads us to the seventh and most paradoxical reason for your physical withdrawal. Motif 7. The silence as a scream. We live in a world that equates health with constant performance and discourse. Silence is often misinterpreted as apathy or surrender. But there are profound silences that scream louder than any words, and when the body chooses to lie down and refuse to rise, it may be the only way for the soul to express what the mouth could not utter. This deep silence, the insistent resting, the fixed gaze at the ceiling, is a cry for help that you might not even hear yourself. Perhaps you spent too long silencing your pain, swallowing frustrations, and muting essential truths to maintain peace and avoid discomfort. Now everything that was suppressed demands space. The suffocated soul finds no other means of expression than to stop everything, to seize up, to withdraw into silence. Jung warned that what is not made conscious returns as destiny. What is not spoken, not lived, not seen, returns as paralysis. The body screams where the word failed. The bed becomes the confessional, the silence, the interval between two worlds. You are moving away from the world sustained by false roles and silent pacts, and moving toward a world not yet born. The soul, when preparing for a transformation, first silences itself, stops, and observes. The collapse, then, is paradoxically the very first gesture of a true restart. If you find yourself in this profound quietude, understand that you are not merely tired, you are in rupture. The truth is simple. Something in you has died. Some version of you is no longer functional. Some role no longer serves. In its place is a silence that is fertile, a space that, while frightening, holds the potent possibility of rebirth. This silence does not need haste or quick answers. It requires space, respect, and time. The bed in this moment is the only place you can offer yourself this profound self-respect. It is time to look at this exhaustion not as a moral failure, but as a language your body and soul have found to communicate what your mind could not translate. Every one of these 7 causes, the persona, the shadow, the father wound, the lack of meaning, the adaptation overload, the archetypal withdrawal, and the silence as a scream, is a profound invitation. An invitation to stop fleeing yourself, to look within, and to finally heed the truth that demands to be heard. It is undeniably painful to recognize how long we ignored these signals, how hard we tried to force continuation when everything inside had already shut down. But this pain is the necessary seed of change, because only by acknowledging the depth of this spiritual exhaustion can we begin to transform it. What forces you to lie down is the sheer excess of falsehood, the mask, and the effort required to sustain a life that no longer aligns with your truth. Your body is not failing, it is being fiercely loyal to your soul. Your exhaustion transforms, ceasing to be a sign of weakness and becoming a symbol of necessary transformation. You are not simply resting, you are reconfiguring your relationship with value, with time, and with the very concept of worth. This process demands profound listening and requires courage. The courage to feel what you avoided, to remember what you buried, and to embrace the exiled parts of yourself. This honest, deep listening does not happen in motion. It happens in the pause, in the silence, in the sacred emptiness. It happens when you finally agree to lie down, not to escape life, but to reconnect with your essence. This video is not about coercing you out of bed, it is about helping you understand why you collapsed in the first place. It is about offering words to an experience that often leaves you isolated and confused. More than that, it is about restoring meaning to what felt meaningless. When exhaustion is truly accepted and welcomed, it begins to change. When the pain is named, it begins to dissolve. When the soul is listened to, the body begins, slowly, to rise. You do not need to rush or force anything now. You only need to allow yourself to be exactly where you are, with all that you feel and all that you do not yet understand. This in itself is an immense act of courage. If you have listened to this message with an open heart, know this: you are already moving not externally, but internally. And this invisible inner movement is the force that will one day carry you back to life, a life that is genuinely yours, honest, and profoundly aligned with who you are meant to be. Now I invite you to share your journey. Not out of obligation, but because your story can illuminate the path for another soul. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 motifs resonated most deeply. Which reason do you recognize most clearly in your body, your silence, or your exhaustion? If you cannot yet name it, simply write, "I am listening to my silence." Because sometimes, knowing you are not alone is enough. If this video offered you truth and comfort, share it, because perhaps someone you know is lying down right now, needing to hear that stopping is sacred. You don't need to rush, you just need to listen and trust the pace of your own soul's healing journey.